Hi, welcome back to Enjoying the Word, and we are thinking about the Bible study process. Okay, we're thinking about how we approach a passage when we're reading it, when we're studying it, in order to make sense of it and to let it impact our lives and for us to enjoy it to the full. So, here's the process in a nutshell. We are thinking about this first step, what I'm calling look. You've got to look and see what is the text saying. And so the first question that we're going to take here to ponder the looking into the text, to see what we're seeing on the page, is the question who. Every Bible passage is dealing with characters, whether it's a story, whether it's a poem, whether it's a letter or speech. There are always people being referenced, and of course, God as well. And so who is referenced? How are they referenced? When you have pronouns like he or him or his, who is it referring to? And so we've got to look closely and see who we have in the passage we're looking at. So here's a passage, John chapter 12, the triumphal entry. Just look at a few verses. And at first glance, this passage is fairly simple. It just looks like a crowd of people and Jesus arriving in Jerusalem. But actually, there's a little bit more detail than that. So let's just walk through it and start to notice. We're not going to make sense of it. That's coming next. That's in the learn stage. In the look stage, we've just got to look closely and make sure we see what is there. The next day, the large crowd that had come to the feast heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. Okay, there's a reference to Jesus, but notice there's also this large crowd. And we are told that the large crowd had come to the feast, and they heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So these are Jews that are not from Jerusalem. These are not local Jews. These are Jews that have traveled in because it's the Passover feast. This would include a significant number of Jews coming down from Galilee. Okay, so we've got a large crowd that's come to the feast. They took palm branches there. They cried out and they went out. Sorry, let's notice this. They went out to meet him. Who's him? Well, it's obviously Jesus, but you want to notice that, okay? And they refer to him. How? Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel. There's a whole lot of labels that are being used there for Jesus. Okay, so Jesus, mentioned again, found a young donkey and sat on it, and then that... Just as it is written, there's an Old Testament quote here, "Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt." So we've got details about Jesus, we've got details about the crowd that have come to the feast. His disciples, there's another group, his disciples did not understand these things at first. But when Jesus was glorified, then they, that's the disciples, remembered that these things had been written about him, that's Jesus, and had been done to him, that's Jesus. Okay, so we're just noticing who is there and how are they described. Look at verse 17, the crowd. Now, do we know who this crowd is? Well, John tells us specifically, if we keep reading, the crowd that had been with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead, continued to bear witness. This crowd is not the same as the earlier crowd. The earlier crowd had come up to Jerusalem for the feast, for the Passover. This crowd had been with him 2 miles away a couple of months before when he had raised Lazarus from the dead, and they were continuing to bear witness. Imagine them milling around, say, I was there, I can tell you, I've seen it with my own eyes, and they're reporting firsthand to anyone that will listen. So we've got two crowds mingling here. Look at verse 18. The reason why the crowd, is this the same crowd? Well, which crowd? The first crowd, the second crowd, or maybe even a third crowd? The reason why the crowd went to meet him. Okay, so what crowd is going to meet him? It could be the Galileans that have traveled up for the festival and they're, responding to rumors that he's coming. Or it could be that the crowd described in verse 18 is the Jerusalem folks, the locals who have heard from the Bethany folks, the Lazarus raising witnesses, or witnesses to the resurrection of Lazarus, they are the ones who are bearing witness, and the locals have heard it for the past couple of months, and so they are now going out to meet him. Now, this melting pot of crowds is observed, verse 19, by the Pharisees. There's another group observing the whole thing, and notice what they say to one another. You see, you are gaining nothing. Look, the world has gone after him. From their perspective, everyone is moving towards Jesus. Of course, the him is Jesus. So when we come to a passage, even before we start to make sense of it, we need to slow down and see who is in the passage. We're going to see some other things too, but at least to get us going, let's start with the who question. Who is there? Who are the pronouns referring to? Who is described? What details do we have about the people that are named or referenced in the passage? It's a great place to start, and you'll always have some answers to the question who when you start looking at a Bible passage. Keep looking, there's more to see, and in the next video we'll ask another question as we continue to look at the details in that passage in John 12.